In today's video, I'm going to show you how to clean up the junk in your garage and build these super sturdy shelves, all for less than $40. Let's get started. For this project, I had a scrap piece of 1/2-inch plywood, and I started off by marking out, measuring, and then cutting the pieces down with a circular saw. And each of these pieces is going to serve as the actual shelf. I ended up having a few pieces that weren't perfectly aligned, so I just went over to the table saw and got everything cleaned up and made sure everything was consistent so each shelf would be the exact same size. You can definitely do this with a circular saw, but since I have the table saw, I went ahead and used that. Next, I took one of the plywood shelves and went over to the miter saw. I lined it up with this little DIY stop block, which I actually have a separate video for if you're interested in checking it out. And I used that to set up my stop block to make sure I would get consistent cuts. Here I'm going to be cutting the 2x4s. You could also do this with a circular saw. And these are going to frame out each of the shelves. So I started off by cutting pieces that are the same length as each of the shelves. Next, I measured the depth of each of the shelves, and then I subtracted 3 inches from that, 1.5 inches for each piece of the 2x4, and that's going to complete framing out the shelves. And here are all the pieces, and this will kind of give you an idea of exactly how it's laid out. So I just put 3 of the small pieces in between 2 of the larger pieces, aligned the small piece in the middle, and then set the plywood on top. And then I'm just going to assemble all this, and this will serve as each of the shelves. To assemble the shelves, I'm using these 2.5-inch construction screws from GripRite. Next, I grabbed a scrap piece of wood and I just clamped it down on my workbench behind my piece. This is just going to make it so much easier when I'm assembling these different pieces so it's not sliding back the whole time. Unfortunately, I ended up with quite a few warped pieces of 2x4 because they've been sitting in the garage for a little while, but I just went ahead and made it work as best I could. It's okay though, because this is just a garage project and nothing that actually requires it to be perfect or super aesthetic. To secure the plywood on top, I used the same GripRite screws, but these ones were 1.5 inches long instead of 2.5 inches. After I finished assembling the shelves, I went to my remaining 2x4 pieces and I marked out the position of each shelf on those pieces. This is going to make it a lot easier when I'm actually assembling the shelves so I can visually see where each shelf needs to be. And I just went ahead and cut off a few inches on the top of each of these because all these were just a little bit too long for the height of my ceiling. I decided to start by lining up the top and the bottom shelves, as I thought this was going to increase the stability to make it easier to assemble the rest of the shelf. I think it worked out pretty well. You can see here that I countersunk and then I used some decking screws to assemble these pieces. And here you can see I'm just moving through the assembly process, flipped it over, and then did the other side. To add the shelves in between, I used some clamps that I lined up with the marks that I already had on the 2x4s, and I used that to help get it aligned. Then I used a rubber mallet just to hit it into place. Some of these pieces, because they were a little bit warped, were kind of tricky, but I think I was able to get everything in place. From here, the process is pretty much the same for all of the remaining shelves. Just line it up with the marks that you already have on your boards, get them in place, and go ahead and secure those with the screws. And I used my impact driver for this. I really love the impact driver. It's one of my favorite tools, but you can certainly do this with a drill as well. And here's the shelf fully assembled, and only one more step is left before we have this project completely done. This last step may be the most important in the project, so make sure you don't skip this. I went ahead and used a stud finder to mark out the studs on the wall, and I pushed the shelf up against the wall, and then I added a little block of trim just to fill the gap since there's trim on the floor. So I did this to secure straight into the studs, and this will ensure that your shelf is super sturdy and isn't going anywhere. Overall, I think this project turned out really good. It's super sturdy, and I was able to really clean up my garage, and I think you'll love it too. Thank you so much for checking out today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed it and found it helpful. And if you did, I would really appreciate if you hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel for more DIY content just like this. Thanks for watching.